This is the Penny University, and it's July 30th. Now that we're on YouTube, see, we're July 30th, 2012. And our guest today is County Supervisor of the 1st District, Mr. John Leopold. And John was elected in November of 2008. He just got re-elected by 71%.
Yay!
I mean, you know, nobody's had a difference like that in an election in a long time. Right?
They told me I couldn't win it when I ran 4 years ago.
Right. Well, it wasn't.
And I came in second in the
Yeah.
primary, actually.
Yes, but this one was an overwhelming.
We got to know you.
Yeah, it was an overwhelming confirmation of what he's been doing in the last bunch of years. So we asked him here today and to talk about whatever he wants to talk about as usual, and we'll go on for as long as he wants and take questions and answers after he's finished. I repeat, after he's finished, and we'll talk about a lot of the Live Oak issues. And the Live Oak issues currently that I know about is water,
Sure.
and water usage, and the day labor center.
Sure.
A little bit of a thing going there. I won't lay out anymore unless you run out of topics. So, anyway, Supervisor John Leopold, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate the invitation. I came here in 1986, as I mentioned earlier, as a student at UC Santa Cruz, and I started going to community meetings, and I've heard about the Penny University for many years, but I've never actually made it to a meeting, so I was really grateful to get the invitation and be part of one of the meetings. I thought that I would just share some information about some things going on in Live Oak and some things and SoCal and the 1st District, sort of some things that we've done and what that means for the future. But I just want to get a show of hands. How many people here live in the city of Santa Cruz?
No.
And how many people might live in the 1st District, Live Oak, SoCal, Santa Cruz Garden? All right, so a nice group of people. So some of you I've seen at some of the community meetings, and some I haven't. So it'll be interesting to see what the response will be. When I came into office, I got as Bruce mentioned, I was elected in 2008, and I come from a history of being involved with community organizing here. In fact, I was a community organizer for the Santa Cruz Action Network when I first graduated college, and I was the executive director of the Santa Cruz AIDS Project. And I worked over the hill for a nonprofit affiliated with the South Bay Labor Council. So organizing was always a big part of the work that I've done. And in my campaign, I had an uphill campaign. I did not have the support of the incumbent, and although I'd been elected to the community college board 2 terms, you know, most people don't know who's on their community college trustee. So it was an organizing effort in order to get elected, and it was a great campaign. And 2008 was a high watermark for grassroots action, electoral action. And I was, with the work that we were doing here in Santa Cruz, able to win with 55% of the vote in November '08. And I came into office wanting to carry that same energy of organizing that I had witnessed as part of my life and just in that recent campaign, to take that into office. And so one of the first things that I realized when I got into office is that the county had a redevelopment agency, that the redevelopment agency was responsible for putting out a plan every 5 years about how it was going to spend this money. This was $40 to $50 million. And I thought that we shouldn't just think about what groovy ideas the county government could think of, that we should ask the people whose money it was. And this got some acknowledgement from county staff, but as I pushed, I said, I don't want to get like 20 or 30 really smart people to decide. I think we should have 200 people decide. And the county government, just like any bureaucracy, is not really interested in lots of input. They like fewer inputs. But a community organizer, we like lots of inputs. and I had to fight them to create and work with them to create a system where people could actually have a say in what was going on. And I put together an organizing committee made up of folks from mobile home parks, churches, youth groups, neighborhood associations, community-based organizations, and with the whole purpose of getting people involved. And we started in May of 2009. There were 10 community workshops. Over the course of that, 500 people got involved. And we took their ideas, and then in the first half of this process, people were asked to come up with ideas. Not that we would tell you what we thought was a good idea, but what did they think? And then in the second half of the process, we asked the community, were those good ideas? So if Bruce had an idea, he lived in Live Oak, he had a good idea, maybe it was a good idea, we should follow it, but maybe it was a bad idea, we shouldn't do it. And we interspersed also some county issues that were there. And there were 5 main goals that people were interested in: public safety, economic development, housing, safe routes for biking and walking, and facilities for young people. That isn't the priority order, that's the order I remembered them in. And you know, when you wouldn't know about this process maybe if you don't live in Live Oak, because it doesn't get covered by the paper that hundreds of people are coming out and participating in a community process. The night that we held, the day we were gonna approve the plan for this redevelopment plan, I asked that we hold the meeting in Live Oak. Board of Supervisors has been around over 150 years, had never held a Board of Supervisors meeting in Live Oak. And so we did it at Live Oak Elementary, and 250 people came out. And I had the jazz band from the Shoreline Middle School playing. If we're gonna decide how to spend $50 million, you know, we should celebrate that. I mean, I thought. And 100 people spoke that night. 97 of them were in favor of the plan. 3 of them were against, including Doug Kaplan, who hates all things about redevelopment. And the next day in the paper, there was a story about that meeting on the absolute last page of the paper. 250 people got together and was in favor of something. And that was the front page story about the Board of Supervisors that day was about me and my colleague Supervisor Bill Trinity. We voted no, without comment, on the sheriff going to get a grant for cannabis eradication. We didn't win the vote, but that was the front page story. So without comment at the Board of Supervisors, that's front page. 250 people getting together makes the last page. That tells you a lot about why you may not know what things that are going on in Live Oak and SoCal. But a number of important things came out of that process. One is when people get together and they're able to talk with their neighbors about what they want for their community, we have a stronger community. 2 is people actually saw their ideas reflected in a plan. That's why they supported it. And when you do that, people feel better about government. And what I noticed almost immediately after this process was done is community meetings about any subject, where we used to get maybe 15, 25 people, we were now getting 40 to 60 people. So to me, that's good civic engagement when people feel like they got heard and they actually want to come back and hear some more. So I've tried to do this in a lot of different ways. I do a constituent meeting where I meet with constituents in different parts of my district each week, every Wednesday, 5:30. And I move it around to different parts of my district. And there was a community, I represent the Summit community, and when I was campaigning in that first race, people said, well, we never see the supervisor unless they're running for office. We'd like to see you more often. So I said, all right, I'll do one of my meetings up here. And the first meeting we got 5 people, and the next meeting we got 7 people, and the next 12. Well, now I average between 40 and 60 people, and if there's a hot issue, there's 100 people there. And it's become a community gathering place. And to me, that's a strength for the community, because you get to know each other. You look out for each other, and people have great ideas. And I've helped them out on some water issues, roads issues, fire issues. But there's a limit sometimes to how far county government can go. And for example, there were 500 people who lost their water source. The fractious geology up there means that you could have a well one day and then it starts going away, and then over a couple of years you have no water left. So there's about 500 families get their water trucked in, and they got it from the Soquel Creek Water District. And 2 years ago, they came and they said, we're going to stop providing you water. We're in an overdraft. We can't do it anymore. But where were these 500 families going to get water? So we at the county helped them identify another source and create, some stability. But they weren't. They after working together on this issue, they said we want to find a longer-term solution. And the county's has some role with water, but we don't have our own water district or anything like that. And so I had the county staff help them, and they set up their own mutual water district. They identified a source up there that was a lot safer and would be around for a long time. They did, I call it a well raising, like a barn raising, where they raised some money and they got together and they hauled these huge tanks in, and it was all legal. And they had me cut the ribbon for this new water jar, the South Mountain water source. And I said, this is the greatest thing that I've ever done that I had nothing to do with. Because it was the people who did the work, not necessarily, we assisted them, but it was the community that came together. And part of the reason they were successful was because we had brought them together on a regular basis where they could talk about these issues and find resources. So I've been interested in taking that to other parts of what we do. And there's, we're using it right now as part of some work around criminal justice reform. Here in Santa Cruz, we have a really different kind of system than a lot of other places for a lot of different reasons. But about a dozen years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, we had a juvenile hall that was filled to the max. 42 spaces in there. There were more than that, and there was a push to build a new juvenile hall. Super expensive, and it's not only for the cost of the facility, it costs more per square foot to build a jail than it does a hospital, and hospitals are really expensive to build. Plus, you have the ongoing cost. And so, one of my predecessors, Supervisor Marty Wormhout, thought that was a bad idea, and she supported efforts by the probation department to do something that at that time was considered an outlier, that maybe we should treat children differently and work to break the cycle of recidivism, address the issues that are causing the problem, find alternative ways of sentencing that don't involve putting them in a cell. And that was a creation of an evening program in Watsonville where students could still go to school and then come and get homework support and other kind of support at an evening center in Watsonville. That's proved to be super successful. We've looked about alternative to incarceration where they could do work out in the community. We set up some neighborhood accountability boards where people could actually, the people who were affected by graffiti or something could have some say in what would happen with people once they were caught. And what we found is we were able to reduce the number of kids that were in our juvenile hall. We also reduced the teen crime rate, and we reduced recidivism. And it cost us less money.
How did you do that?
Well, I just outlined some of it, and when we get to the questions, I'm happy to talk about it some more. But tonight we only have about 18 kids who were there, and it's a way different program in the way we treat juveniles in Santa Cruz County. And when we started 12 to 15 years ago, we were an outlier. There wasn't very many people. But now there's been a lot of work being done around the country. I went to a conference last year where there were 600 communities that wanted to do what we were doing. We've had visitors from 40 states come to Santa Cruz County to learn about what we do here. And the system has been adopted, I think, by the entire state of Missouri as their model. So as we, given that kind of history, what can we do about adult incarceration? Because we spend a lot of money locking people up in Santa Cruz, and nearly 70% of them come back within 3 years. we spend over $20 million a year. So I started working using the local talents that we have here, which was leveraging colleagues on the board that cared about this, Supervisor Neil Cooney. Went up to the university and found 2 faculty members, Doctors Craig Haney and Craig Reinerman. Started working with our probation department, Judge Salazar, a couple others, to start talking about what it is we could do. And when the governor announced prison realignment last year, we said this is our opportunity. Let's talk about something different. And so we used that same organizing model that we had done for the redevelopment meetings, and we said we're gonna hold meetings in every district in Santa Cruz County to educate people about what opportunities there are and to help them understand what these changes were going on with the law, because there's a lot of bad information that's out here. So put together an organizing committee, and on May 23rd, 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court issued their decision in Plata v. Brown, which required the state prison system to release over 34,000 prisoners in the state prison system. That very night, we had a meeting in Live Oak at that same elementary school that I mentioned earlier. Over 250 people were there, and they were listening to the sheriff, the probation director, and Dr. Craig Haney talk about why the prison system doesn't work, and maybe we could do a better job here in Santa Cruz. And I would say, not surprisingly, the crowd was into it. In fact, just as an aside, the next day I went on the internet and I looked at KION, which is our Fox affiliate, and they had sent a reporter down at 5 o'clock, and they said, I'm down here at Live Oak Elementary, and in just a couple hours, hundreds of people are going to come out and tell the sheriff to not release these scary criminals into our community. And I'll be back at 10 with a live report. And then the next video is their live report at 10 o'clock. And she was a little white. You know, she's like, well, I'm down here at Live Oak Elementary. It's standing room only. And the community actually seems to be into these reforms. It's like it never occurred to her that people could have a different point of view. So we've now done 2 more, one in Santa Cruz at over 200 people, one in Aptos to nearly 100. And we started a process of doing workshops that we could actually find out what choices people would make, right? Tens of millions of dollars are spent each year, your money, on incarceration. Maybe we could do a better job. So the first one we did, I think in March in Live Oak, we had over 100 people, and we now done them in Watsonville, where we had over 100 people. We had we did one here in Santa Cruz. They've done a number of smaller ones, but this kind of active engagement of citizens, where the community is telling county government how you'd like us to spend your money, and really be listening and incorporating these ideas, to me is a strength of our system. And Santa Cruz is doing something different than most other counties. We're not building new jail bed space. We are working to release or alternatively sentence people in different ways. There's a lot more people on electronic monitors. The first day of prison realignment here in Santa Cruz County, there were 30 people in jail for driver's license violations. You know, so,
Violent.
you know, could these people be serving their time at home with an ankle bracelet or some other way? So we're at the beginning of this. We're gonna this October will mark the first year, but I think we've made great strides. And you might have read something recently in the paper where we're also instituting a program that was started back in '07, Gemma, for women who were in prison or in jail, and helping them deal with some of the issues that would cause them to not recidivate. And we just did our first program with men that we're hopeful will be a model that we can expand out. And we're talking about building a school down at the facility, the Roundtree facility down in Watsonville, rather than more jail beds. And that gives you an idea that that's a reflection of what we're hearing from the community. So when I believe grassroots action means you got to get people to come have an informed conversation, but then you also have to listen. And I think that we're trying to do that at county government. So what does that mean for the future? There's a number of different issues that are coming up that are really critical for the county. You know, here in Santa Cruz, experiencing a rate of unemployment that's higher than the statewide average or the national average. And when we did that redevelopment planning process, people talked about economic vitality as one of their key issues, although it was very unclear about what it is they meant. You know, economic development for some people is you know it when you see it, but it's hard to articulate or plan out for what it is you want unless you can be informed about it. So starting in the next 6 months, hopefully it's going to be this fall, but if not, it'll be right after the first of the year. We're going to start a process where we're going to go out to the folks in the unincorporated parts of this county and start talking about economic development issues. And help
What
with-
kind of budget numbers or predictions? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, county government is not going to be creating a lot of jobs. That's, you know, we are shrinking, right? The size of government, but government doesn't usually make jobs. You know, what can we do to be able to support the creation of jobs? And how do we do that in a way that retains our character and doesn't turn us into everywhere USA? And there's one example of what we're doing right now around the Soquel Drive corridor. The Soquel Drive corridor is the main route through the county that's not a highway. And we all drive on it, and or take a bus on it. And we got a grant from the Sustainable Communities Program to look at Soquel Drive and try to think about it differently. If we're thinking about what the future is in Santa Cruz, about development, we are reaching some limit about available housing space in the unincorporated part of this county. The voters in Santa Cruz adopted a measure in 1978 that set an urban services boundary. So we would have, with the idea of centering our development within this urban boundary, and outside that boundary, it would be we would maintain our rural character. So in our general plan estimate, that means there are about 1,300 available spaces in the unincorporated part of the county for housing. That's a fairly low number. And we could choose to say, once we get to that number, that's it, no more. It would be very unpopular. We could move the urban services boundary. I think that's a bad environmental trait and would change the nature of our county. Or we could think about doing smarter development within the urban services boundary. So as we look at the Soquel Drive corridor, we're trying to think, what kind of smarter development could you do? How do you engage the community to have a conversation are there areas where we want to promote more housing, services, and other amenities, so there are nodes where people don't have to get in their car to get a loaf of bread, go to their job, be close to schools. And if you look at Soquel Drive, let's just take one part of it, the beginning of it, which is right there at the overpass, near Dominican, to 41st Avenue. What could we do in that segment? Well, we have the medical center of the county, right? We have 2 hospitals. We have doctors who say they need more space. I'm a former trustee at Carrillo College, where we worked hard to double the size of our nursing program when I was there, because people can graduate out of that 2-year program into a $60,000 a year job. So we want to make sure that there are jobs there and there are opportunities for that field to expand. And so what can we do in that corridor to support that industry, which is not an industry you can outsource. You can't outsource your nurse. And so how do we build that and think about the opportunities we have? There's a 6-acre plot on the corner of Thurber and Soquel, undeveloped. There's the drive-in spot. It's 5 acres, undeveloped.
I thought the hospital had that.
The hospital owns it, but what if we think about what our current zoning allows in there, we may not be able to maximize what we could get to be able to support this industry. You know, if we have, let's say, through a community conversation, that people would say, that'd be a spot where maybe you could build a 4-story building. let's just say, this is just an example. If Dominican came and said, or Sutter came and said, we want a 4-story building there. We're gonna put offices, and we're gonna have housing on top, whatever that is. They would have to go through a process, and we would just be looking at that one thing. But if we think about the corridor in total, what do we need that if we're gonna have offices there, where is the housing for the people who are gonna live there? What's the transportation mode? Do we have enough density to support a more active bus service there? So how are we thinking about the future development? Because I'm not a big fan of the fights we get into over individual projects. We know how to do that real well here in Santa Cruz. But we very rarely think about how we plan for the future and actively engage lots of people in what those decisions are. So I'm interested in making sure that we do that. So we're going to do the Soquel Drive Transit Corridor Plan. It's a 3-year process that we're going to do community meetings. We have an advisor group that's a very broad range of folks. It's going to come to the Board of Supervisors a couple times along the way, so there'll be public hearings about it. Because I believe the more people you get involved, the better decision we'll make. But I believe you have to be able to provide information to have an informed discussion, so you don't just say, I don't like that height of that building, or that color is wrong, or I don't like that kind of business. Let's look at the whole plan, and then we can work with local landowners or developers to build what it is we want, rather than hoping that they want to put another Walgreens on that corner, and we don't need that. That's not a need, but then if it's zoned for that you could do it. So that's a different way to think about economic development, and that's a process that's going to, the transit corridor plan process has already started. We haven't done any big community meetings. There's an advisory group that's met, but that'll be starting in the fall. We have a new economic development staff member. I fought to get an economic staff member because I was surprised when I came to the county 4 years ago that 50% of the population lives in the unincorporated area, but there was not one person in county government of the 2,500 employees who thought about the economic lives of the 50% of our population every day, all day. I just thought, the city of Santa Cruz had 7 people. So we need to we need someone who's got an eye on the ball, not to craft, groovy deals, right? We don't like those. But to really sort of manage a process where we engage the community, come up with a plan, and work to fill out that plan. So that's what we're working on right now. Bruce brought up the question of water, and water is a huge issue for our county and state and the world. If I was to look at the last 35 years in Santa Cruz County, there was the big fight was around growth management, and I would argue that that's a fight that has been won in a lot of ways. Our planning rules, the ethos in the county supports a reasonable set of growth management policies. That doesn't mean we don't fight about individual projects, because we do. But I believe the next 25 years is going to be about water. Because here in Santa Cruz, especially the north part of the county, most of the water comes from surface sources, not out of the ground. And even where it comes out of the ground, there are increasing problems. So Soquel Creek Water District is facing saltwater intrusion and overdraft. Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency, tremendous saltwater intrusion and overdraft. So we're going to fight about this, because ultimately, without water, we don't have life, and without life, we don't have a community. So you can't talk about development in any kind of way, or good development or bad development, if you don't have the basic resources to be able to support that development. So right now, there's a number of really big issues that are going on. One involves the Soquel Creek Water District and the city of Santa Cruz working together to investigate the possibility of a desalination plant in Santa Cruz. I won't go through that whole issue unless people want to talk about it, but that's going to be on the ballot here in the city of Santa Cruz. It will one day be on the ballot in the Soquel Creek Water District, and if I'm successful with the city of Santa Cruz, hopefully it'll be on the ballot for the 35,000 people that have no representation in any of these water decisions. I live in Live Oak. I'm the supervisor of Live Oak. The mayor of Santa Cruz and I drink the same water. I pay on average about 26% more for that water, and I have no say in the management of the system. No say. The board of directors for the city of Santa Cruz Water District, of which nearly 40% of the district isn't in the city, the board of directors is elected city council members in the city of Santa Cruz. So in my neighborhood, we pay more and we have no say in the system, and we're just about ready to make, there's plans to make over $100 million investment in a water source that I'm going to have to pay for more than the mayor of Santa Cruz. So I want to make sure that we have a say. If the Soquel Creek Water District is going to have a say and the city of Santa Cruz is going to have a say, let's get those people in the middle to have a say. And I'm working with the mayor right now, and I'm hopeful that with that, when the city has a measure on the ballot in 2014, I believe the Soquel Creek and the residents of Live Oak, parts of Capitola, Carbonero Estates, Santa Cruz Gardens will also have a say in an advisory measure. Again, I believe in democratic action at the small d, and I believe that we should have a say in these major decisions. The other thing which is going on in a sort of a parallel universe is the university's interest in wanting to grow. And the university, city, and county, before I got on the Board of Supervisors, signed an agreement, comprehensive settlement agreement. You've all heard about that. And in that, they said, we're going to allow you to grow in exchange for paying roughly about $10 million to the city of Santa Cruz for transportation and other infrastructure improvements. And they agreed to house a record number of students on campus. They also agreed that they would go to the local area formation commission, LAFCO, which is a boundary setting commission set up by state government back in the 60s, that to get approval to be able to provide service to the expanded part of campus, the North Campus area, that is outside the city of Santa Cruz. They are legally not allowed to provide water outside their boundaries unless they're in their service area, and right now that area is not in their service area. So the university and city have agreed. They submitted applications to LAFCO. I serve on LAFCO. We had our first discussion about it December of last year. At that time, I was on the losing end of a 5-2 vote that basically said, okay, we're okay with it, with these almost no conditions at all. It came back, the way we work in LAFCO is we talk about things conceptually, and then they come back with the actual legal documents. When it came back in March, I was on the winning end of a 4-3 vote that said we should have some meaningful conditions. And what are those meaningful conditions? One is that the university should be water neutral in any new development. The technology is out there. If they're going to expand to the North Campus, why use any additional water? There's a lot of water savings that could be going on right now, and that we should use it at a level where that's reasonable, set where that conservation level is. In 2003, the highest year of water use ever at the university was 206 million gallons a year. Now it's down to 151. So their comprehensive settlement agreement says we don't only have to start conserving until we get up to 206 million. And I said, well, that's like a 1-year number. Why pick 1 year? Let's look at a 5-year average. And if you look at the last 5 years, it's a 176 million gallons, which is, so just to point that, that's 25 million gallons more than they're using right now. I asked that be the dividing line for conservation. And the other thing which I asked, because we went through a very involved process last year to create a set of water policies for LAFCO, which said, basically, you have to prove that you have an adequate, reliable, and sustainable water supply. And we came up with that after consulting with all the water districts, having them involved in the creation of the policy, looking what other LAFCOs do, and San Luis Obispo had this same measure. It had it for 7 years, they'd never been sued on it. And we didn't prescribe what was the way that someone had to prove that they had an adequate, reliable, and sustainable water supply, because there might be different ways that people could prove it. But you couldn't count paper water that you didn't have that you might have in the future. We said you couldn't have. So I said, I got the commission to agree that they had to prove that they had an adequate, reliable, and sustainable water supply, because they had a 13-year negotiation so far with the Department of Fish and Game and the National Oceanic Administration, or NOAA. I don't remember exactly what it stands for at this hour of the day. That they've been fighting over how much water they could leave in streams to protect the endangered fish. And there have been lots of back and forth about this, and the regulatory agencies are saying you should prepare to take a lot less water out of the streams if we're going to save these fish. And they have it tiered 1, which is what we do now, tier 2, which is a little bit less, and tier 3, which is a lot less taken from the streams. In the city's own water planning documents, they said we can't even contemplate tier 3 because it would be such a big change that we would have to redo all of our water works. Well, if the regulatory agency said you should prepare for tier 3, that's an indication that they're going to require that of the city. It didn't seem to me that you could say you had an adequate water supply to be able to provide what the city and university were asking for, which is 150 million gallons more a year. So this was successful at the commission, that they had to come back and prove this. In the intervening months, I counted how many times we'd received letters from either the city or the universities threatening to sue us. 9 times in less than 4 months, they threatened to sue us in writing. And when we met on June 6th, the day after the election, to do a final vote, the mayor of Santa Cruz came forward with a revised set of conditions that had some very complicated pieces to it. Well, I'm in the interest of trying to avoid having to pay lots of lawyers to settle things. No offense to the lawyers in the room. But if there's some way that we can work it out, I'm in favor of it. And we were not going to give them permission until we can work something out. So at that meeting, after many hours of very good testimony from community members, undergraduate students, and graduate students whose area of expertise is in water and water issues and endangered fish, endangered species, we decided that we're going to try to see if there's a way to work this out with the city and university. I'm an optimistic guy. So we're having some meetings. We're going to be meeting, the LAFCO is going to be meeting again on Wednesday. We meet the first Wednesday of every month. We're not making any decisions on Wednesday, but we'll get some reports back from some of the committees that are trying to work on some of these issues or conditions. But to me, you can't say out of one side of your mouth that we have a water problem and we have to create a water source that's going to cost $100 million to manufacture water to prevent us from the drought that we know is coming. And on the other side, say we have enough water to give 150 million gallons to the university to allow them to grow. So that seemed fairly simple to me. It's very tough for people in the city and the university to think that that's a good idea. There's a lot of work that I'll still need to do with my colleagues on LAFCO to be able to convince them that in the end we should have a set of meaningful conditions. But I'm hopeful that we can come up with something that works and that we can say we're making a decision where we can feel confident that they have an adequate, reliable, and sustainable water supply. So there's a lot of work to do in the Mid-County and Santa Cruz County. We're in a transition moment with our economy. What the community will look like in 20 years and what its elements will be is we're trying to figure out what's gonna be in the future. I am confident, though, that if we get people involved, if we inform the citizenry and we provide meaningful forums where they can get involved, that we can come up with really good policy that are reflective of who we are here in Santa Cruz, and be a leader not only among mid-sized counties that we are, but in the state of California and the country. And I think there's lots of good opportunities around that. We're just taking the first steps on community choice aggregation, which is really to create our own power utility here. We're at the earliest stages of that. We are thinking differently about economic development. We're thinking differently about transportation, where the debate, which has gone on, raged for years here, about Highway 1 is now changing to a debate about what are we going to do to support local roads. So to me, it's a very exciting time to be in local government. And if you look about what's happening at the federal level and the state level, this is where the innovation and action is going to be at the local level. What we do here in Santa Cruz and what we do in communities across California is really where you're going to come up with the best ideas. They're not going to come from on high in Washington, and it seems unlikely that they're going to come from Sacramento. So we have to be creative here, and through our creativity, we can set the pace for the rest of the state. So I look forward to working with everybody over the next 4 years, and I'm open to have people having questions. So.
Wait, first of all, how about one of the issues that we like to talk a lot about here, and it's on your website, is 180.
Oh yeah, sure. So we as a community here in Santa Cruz have been working to support people who were suffering from homelessness in lots of different ways. Ed here would disagree that we're doing it completely effectively, but we've invested a lot of resources. Local government has invested a lot of resources over the year. There's a dynamic young woman who's now leading the Homeless Resource Center named Monica Martinez, and she's trying to get us to think differently about it. And there's a nationwide movement called the 100,000 Homes Campaign, whose goal it is to house the most medically vulnerable homeless in the country. And when you look at the statistics, they're alarming. The average age of someone living on the streets, or their mortality, is about 48 years old. That the differences that we can be making in providing housing and supportive services for them can not only expand their life, but actually cost us less money. Los Angeles County invested in a very small pilot program of this, where they housed 50 of the most medically vulnerable homeless. And after 2 or 3 years of study, I don't remember exactly, they identified that they spent less money housing them than they did when they were homeless and trying to provide services for them. So if you can keep people alive and spend less money doing it, hopefully that's a no-brainer. So Monica got this great guy, Phil Kramer, who's involved with this 180 campaign, which is about housing here in Santa Cruz 180 of the most medically vulnerable homeless, and giving them a 180 turn to their life, which is to turn their life around. And I like the energy she brings to this, and just the thoughtfulness she's looking at this strategy. Part of it is going to be through thinking about our housing resources and how to get people in there and not having as many hoops that they might have to jump through. Part of it is maybe getting Section 8, Section 8 vouchers that are restricted just to house the most medically vulnerable in Santa Cruz. Our board wrote a letter to the Housing Authority to try to get them set aside. And there's a number of other strategies, including raising local money to be able to do that. To me, this is a positive compliment to the work that's been going on for years here in Santa Cruz. And I think it will make a big difference in the lives of a lot of people here. They've done the research. They've gone out over a number of days and nights trying to identify who the most medically vulnerable are. They know who those are. They know what their stories are. They know where to find them. And if we can get them housing, I think that we'll be a better community for it. So, thank you for asking that.
I have sort of, what do you mean by medical vulnerable, and then I have another.
Well,
thing to say, too.
There's two things I would say. One is, it's my first day back from vacation, so if I'm not sharp on my memory, it's because it's my first day back from vacation. And the second thing is that there's a number of different categories they have about been their hospital usage, what their age is, what kind of disabilities they might have, whether there are addiction issues. So they looked at them, and it's not just a function of age, because what I found fascinating and sad and it's hard to process is that when they went out and did this survey to find out who these medically vulnerable folks were, they found someone on the streets who was 80 years old. Now that person had been on the street less than a year and didn't have a lot of other medical problems other than they had lost their housing. So that person didn't qualify in their list of 180. That's how bad the situation is. But there are people who've been in the hospital for heart problems, have an addiction problem, have a list of other medical problems that make them very vulnerable. And if we can get that person housed, that person will live longer. And as fellow human beings, I take that pretty seriously.
I also want to say that I've thought of the idea of having a dormitory for Cabrillo College students rather than converted garages by people that are trying to make money and so on.
Well, you know, it's interesting. The county was required to rezone a number of properties because of a lawsuit several years back for higher density housing. And one of the locations that was identified as part of that was the Par 3 golf course in Aptos. And at the time, I was on the Cabrillo College board, and there were those of us on the board were actually excited about that opportunity because we have a hard time finding housing for the faculty, staff, and students at Cabrillo. So here was a place that was going to be close enough that people wouldn't have to get in their car to be able to get to Cabrillo. Now there were lots of things that happened around that, and we ended up not choosing that as one of the sites. But it was a missed opportunity to think about housing for the population that we all support, right? And there's been some work done. There's been some townhomes done in that Cabrillo Commons project, which is right across from the temple, right near Cabrillo, which we've been able to purchase some of those units to help those young people who are transitioning out of foster care to find them housing there so they can go to Cabrillo. So it's, you know, there's a lot of work to be done. Cabrillo is a beloved institution of which most families in Santa Cruz County in some ways access, whether they send their children there, 49% of all the high school graduates go there, or whether people go for enrichment classes or to improve themselves or change careers. You know, community colleges play all those roles. So.
Or the theater and music.
Yeah, I mean the theater and music program are beloved here in the community. Stroke Center is a great program.
Go ahead.
My name's Mitch. I've been a fan of the Smithsonian since I was a Y2K contractor. My question is about kind of this, you mentioned sister cities, or sister county, no, you said Missouri. You said Missouri cloned a Santa Cruz County experiment, I think, or something like that. There's a guy named Mike Reynolds in New Mexico called The Garbage Warrior. There's a documentary about him and, on YouTube, I think. He pioneered a new kind of open space that's for extremely cheap experimental housing. And his career and the story of how it happened is legendary. But anyone can meet Adam at the courthouse and speak with Assembly Manning's Secretarial Liaison. And we could clone, for example, the best of certain other counties.
Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting. When I ran this time, one of my opponents claimed that I was part of some master conspiracy because I said that it was okay for us to take the best examples of other places and use them here. He considered that part of this Agenda 21 conspiracy. And
From the Grange.
yeah, but I think you look at what other communities are doing, and take what the best of that is, and where it's appropriate, use here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Especially
safeguards
against martial law.
Well, I mean, but I'm just saying globally, it's helpful for us to to be aware of what's going on in communities around the country
For sure.
and see what's going on. As I mentioned, this community choice aggregation, Marin is leading the way. They're way out in front of everybody else. Well, we're looking to see what they're doing, both the opportunities that they've taken or the challenges that they face. So as we do our own work, it's going to take a couple of years, that we try to avoid those common pitfalls, but also sort of say, hey, they have an idea that they've tested. Let's use that idea, and we'll add our own bells and whistles to it. But you know, if there's good ideas about housing or open space or anything, I'm all ears to hearing good ideas.
So, I'm curious about the Veterans Hall and what's being done about that. I mean, that just kind of seems like a glaring travesty to me every time I walk past it, that it's been closed for a few years now, and we're in the midst of a suicide epidemic amongst veterans. And
Even NFL players.
I mean, I don't have firsthand
Sure.
knowledge of what's going on within
No,
the county government, but it doesn't seem like it's being prioritized.
Well, I would disagree with you. So in January of 2010, I think it was, that a series of things happened where the Veterans Hall in Santa Cruz is in the city of Santa Cruz, but the county is responsible for it. So some complaints were registered. We had to bring in an architect to figure out what we could do to fix some of the problems. In the course of that, they found major structural damage to the building. So great that they said, in an earthquake, the back half of the building could actually fall down. That's fairly extraordinary, and once you're a public agency especially, and you hear that your building is going to fall down, or has the potential to fall down, you need to move quickly. And the county did move quickly to close the building. Then the county spent several months trying to identify if there were any federal funding sources to be able to fix it, because the price tag on it is in the $3 to $4 million range.
Interjection. Is it a
Yeah, let me finish what I was saying. Let me answer his question. I answered your question. So that's, you know, every year that I've been on the board, we've cut money from our budget. So it's not like we have a lot of money around. So when we get a $3 or $4 million unexpected expense, that's a big deal to us. And so we first looked to our federal sources to see whether there was any resources from the federal government to help us repair this building. We found, after working with Congressman Sam Farr and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, that there was not money available from the Veterans Administration. So then we started trying to figure out, are there things that we could do, open part of the building, is there something we could do to make it more safe? During that same period of time, we offered all the veterans groups that were there to use an available facility at the Emmeline complex. They did not like that. They took us to court over it. They were successful in their court battle. But they ended up using that space at Emmeline as well. Last year, as part of our budget hearings, the board agreed to bond and commit future general fund revenue to pay for the repair of the veterans building. It's a really big job, because not only will we going to fix the structural components, and that's, you know, as I say, the back half of the building potentially falling down, and the work that has to be done there, but we're also taking advantage of doing something to fix the long-standing problem, like there was a big heating problem there. Well, when they built the building, they built the furnace, and then they built the room around the furnace. So to get it out, you have to disassemble the entire furnace, and it's not, you know, in 1932, a furnace, you know, might take up the size of this room. Today, it might take up the size of this table. But you have to get the one that's bigger than the doorway out of there. So it takes a lot of work. So we've hired the construction management company. They have hired the contractor. The pre-work is going on. The services are still available all the services that were there are available at the Emmeline building. And if they're not available there, it's because people have chosen not to use that space. So I believe that the county acted deliberatively and moved quickly for an unprepared for expense. That was a big deal. You know, when you have to spend, as I say, $4 million of county money, when you're cutting $25 million of the general fund, that's a big hit. So at the same time, we were also closing down the redevelopment agency and losing all those funds. So we have some very good veteran services here in Santa Cruz, and you're absolutely right that the epidemic numbers for suicide and members of the armed forces is alarming. And I don't think the loss of the veterans building is a contributor to that. But that building was not only used by veterans, but by lots of the community, and we want to get it back up and running. And as I say, we're moving forward to that. I don't remember off the top of my head what's the expected completion date. It's probably at least 1.5 years away.
But there is a time frame set now, or?
Yeah. I mean, if you call my office, I can look it up and tell you. I just don't remember today
Okay.
what that timeline is. But we've committed the funds.
Great.
Thanks. Yeah, as you probably know, Santa Cruz County is one of the top 2 counties for biological hotspots. Might be vying for one behind San Diego in the country, despite its very small size. Years ago, we had sensitive.
Can you describe what hotspot
Yeah.
means?
So in this case, it means more groups of organisms are more endangered than any other county in the U.S. We have quite diversity. Species diversity is huge here. Years ago, we had a general plan that recognized sensitive plant habitats, sensitive ordinances for those habitats. The county instituted independent scientific review process that now violates all of the guidelines for independent scientific review. The same person's been doing it since that began. And despite numerous complaints to the county and visual destruction of huge areas of sensitive habitats, there's nothing being done. So if you see a way to adequately bring the county up to, as you say, innovation level that recognizes the rarity and sensitivity of its habitats, how are we going to move this forward?
Well, I don't know all the details of what you described, Gray, so I will plead ignorance in regard to that, and I'd love to talk with you a little bit more about it to better understand. So I can't speak specifically about where the shortcomings are or what we could do to change it. I think that the county has, in the nearly 4 years that I've been on there, has done some good environmental policy, which have been big changes. So, for example, we used to, if a tree fell down near the creeks, we would actually use public works staff to go cut the tree down and take it out. Well, one of the things that we found is that when you look at salmon and spawning, the woody material is some of the place where they spawn, and that leaving the wood in the creek had beneficial environmental impacts. So not only were we harming sort of a natural process, but we were actually paying to do it at a time when we had no money. So we, working with our Commission on the Environment, our Water Commission, our Environmental Health Department brought a new policy around woody debris, where we actually now leave it in the water. We actually think that not only does it help the fish, but it'll also help when the next flood comes down, right? Because that wood which is left in there will act to prevent, when you have a clear channel and the wood starts falling down in a rainstorm, what we saw in SoCal in 1982 was all the wood came down at one time, got to the bridge and formed a dam and flooded out the town. We've raised the bridge, but we obviously don't want all that wood coming down at one time, so the woody debris will not only help the fish, but when that next storm comes that generates that kind of water flow and trees going down, as they did in 1982, we think that's going to help us in terms of flood management. So to me, that's an innovative policy. that we can feel good about and has good positive environmental impacts. And we need to look for those opportunities. So we should talk offline about where some of the other holes are, and I'd be interested in trying to take a look at that.
Hold on.
Our vote for desal, against desal. Okay, that's where I'm at. I'm seventh generation California. I don't think we should have a damn desal when you brought up the point that we've got enough water. It seems to be a distribution problem.
Well, I mean, listen, the citizens the voters in the city of Santa Cruz will get a chance to vote this fall on requiring the city to go to a vote of the people before they spend any more money on the desal
But we can all be
issue.
so dumb and screw up.
Yeah, we in the other, let's say, nearly 40,000 customers of the water system, we don't have a say in that. So, and there isn't really a mechanism. So people went out and got signatures, and they were able to put it on the ballot in the city. But there's not an enforceable thing that we could do in the county, in Live Oak and Carbonera and Santa Cruz Gardens, that would get it that you could actually have a meaningful vote.
So Carbonero is in the city limits of Santa Cruz.
Part of it is.
Part of it.
Part of it is. And part of it isn't. I know because when I got into office, there was a problem, and they said, the city tells me it's a county problem, the county tells me it's a city problem. It's a whole other story, but I just think people should get a chance to vote on these things, and if one part of the customer base is going to get to vote on it, I think everybody should get a chance to vote on it. That's basic
But
democracy.
that's not how it's gonna go though.
Not in this November, no.
That's what we're gonna do.
What's the phone number for your office and what is your website?
Well, the phone number for the office is 454-2200, and the county's website is www.co.santa-cruz.ca.us. And there it has information not only about me, but all the county services. It also tells you when my constituent meetings are, if you go to the part about the board of supervisors. And then I also have my own personal website, which is www.friendsofjohnleopold.com, which has a link to my YouTube channel where I talk about issues. You can hear about vacation rentals, medical marijuana, the rail line purchase, a host of other issues that I've worked on over the past 3.5 years.
Measure K, is that part?
One of the things that I find in talking to people about things, because people complain to real estate agents regularly about everything. I don't know why. We just are good listeners, I guess. But I'll say, go and talk to your supervisor about this, or go and talk to government about it. Very often, I find by the time they get there, they're yelling. And that's a very difficult, for me, place to be listening. Are there suggestions if somebody has an issue? What is the best way to approach it? What are the things that you would suggest so that it allows for openness on the part of the people they're talking to?
Well, I had a friend who was a used car salesman, and he said that when people came to buy a car, they were girded for battle, right? Because our stereotype of used car salesmen is we're suspicious of them, we believe they're going to do something to us. And he was a very honest guy, and it was a terrible line of work for him because people came ready to yell. So politicians are maybe like one step above used car salesmen and how people react to them, right? I mean, people are very suspicious of politicians.
Oh, thank you.
And they generally think that we're not acting in their interests. So what I try to do, is I try to be out there a whole bunch. Not only do I hold regular constituent meetings and I go out to the community to talk about various issues, but I try to go to a lot of community events that people can have informal interaction with me. You come to the Live Oak Farmers Market, people are bending my ear about lots of things, which I think is helpful. I think it's useful. I go there in part because I want to have that interaction. But people, when they start having a problem, they need to contact local government. If you live in the unincorporated part of the county, if you live in the first district and most of it is unincorporated, that's me. My job as the county supervisor is to translate the work of the county. And you call me up, I may not be able to help you directly, but I may have to pull in other members of county government to be able to assist you. And if it's an issue that is bigger than just you and the county, we're gonna hold, I'm gonna try to get people together. So, you know, a couple people came to me, you might have seen this in the paper, we're having a meeting on Thursday night about Target. Because they, you know, everybody likes, a lot of people like Target coming here, but they put up 8 signs around their store that shine up until 11 o'clock at night. And it's like, you know, it's, people feel like they live in Scandinavia if you live on Somerset because the sun never goes down, you know, and
Yeah.
it's, and so we're gonna hold a meeting and hopefully work with the city of Capitola and Target to plant some trees, to turn the lights off sooner, to move some signs, because they're frustrated, right? They just wanna go to bed. And they got this red light, you know, beaming into their bedroom. So I try to encourage people to get involved. And I understand that part of my job is to take the heat, right? So you come at me angry. Part of my job is I'm the receptor, right? If you don't think that's part of the job description, it's probably not a good line of work for you. But hopefully my job can help explain and translate what the county government's doing and provide a path where people can get some satisfaction. You know, I've had business owners who, like I had a little motorcycle shop, came to me and they said, we just want to open this motorcycle shop on 17th in SoCal. But the county wants to charge us $52,000 in fees.
Jeez.
I'm Jewish, but I might say that same thing. And that was crazy to me. And I went to the planning director and I said, does that seem as crazy to you as it does to me? And he goes, it seems pretty crazy. So when he investigated it, there was just a reading of the rules that said they had to pay this. Well, it was like the worst reading you could possibly give. So within the context of what was actually legal, we brought those down to $3,500. They've opened that shop. They've been contributing to our sales tax base for the past 4 years. They're a local family and they hire local people. So that's a win on every level of it. But I don't think that we should have a system where it depends on having a friendly supervisor. We should have a system that works better. So we're working on these systematic pieces. I mean, one of the things about doing our economic development work right now, and thinking about some of our planning regulations, is that this is not a period where there's a lot of activity. It's the best time to make changes, because we often get hassled because someone's got a project in gear and then we change the rules and then they have to spend a lot more money. So when there's little activity, that's a time for us to have a community conversation. What do we want? So when the building picks up again, we're ready to go. So.
Job
Ed.
creation.
John, about a few months before this 180 program was suggested, I wrote a letter to the County Health Services Agency pointing out to the director that under the state statutes, the Welfare and Institutions Code, the each county has specific responsibilities to protect the health of the indigent, which means they have to provide whatever services are necessary, including non-medical services, and that's part of the statute. So I asked them, why don't you, since this, for example, this 180 program will only cover maybe 5 to 7% of the actual number of homeless people in the county, why don't you do what we did at Peace Camp, which is to set up a specific area where people could come and sleep safely in a group at night, have an outhouse there for them, and then they'd be gone in the morning. So that, like right now, the city of Santa Cruz, as you know probably, is out beating the bushes everywhere within the city limits, and I think maybe the county's doing it too, rousting people from their homes, which their campsites. But now with this state statute against lodging, there isn't a single square inch in the state of California where people can sleep legally. So why can't the county, which is what I asked the health services director, why can't the county designate a specific parcel or parcels where people can come at night and sleep without getting arrested?
Well, you know, the issue of homelessness is not easily solved, and I'm not sure the best public policy response is to set up a camping area outside with that may or may not have adequate facilities for people to use the bathroom or anything else. To me, I'm into working on solutions that create long-term systemic change. That's why I support the 180 campaign. Because as you point out, it may only be 5 to 7% of the local homeless population, but that, you know, we're starting to move. That's a move in the right step, which is to provide housing for people. The county only responds if neighbors complain. If neighbors complain to me about people living in Rodeo Gulch, where they've heard screaming and everything, we've sent people down into the gulch and we've rousted people out of there because we found 2 people who had warrants against them, and one person who it was a sex offender who had lost contact with their which hadn't registered with the county when they came into the county. So there are people who have legitimate concerns about the folks who are living in the open spaces near their homes. And I'm not sure that a public policy response, an effective public policy response, is just to say, well, let's create a area where people can camp. There are, you know, let's say in my district, the Seventh-day Adventists have a huge campground. A religious organization, people could make an appeal to them to house folks there.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that it wasn't that long ago that on the email list that serves SoCal, people were very concerned about homes. They had seen more and more homeless in SoCal, right? We don't, you know, we think of it as a city of Santa Cruz problem or issue, but here was SoCal telling me and themselves, it's like, have you noticed we have got a lot more people? So last fall, I brought Monica from the Homeless Resource Center, Christine Sippel from the Homeless Persons Health Project, to a meeting, and we had about 25 people from SoCal to talk about it. And I found that people were very compassionate. They wanted to do something, and some people felt more comfortable with people camping near their house than others, right? But to sort of say that our public policy response is just say it's okay to think that we're not going to provide housing. I'd like to provide more affordable housing. And in the years that I've been on the County Board of Supervisors, we changed our rules around the housing supported by redevelopment to make it, to be able to support a wider range of services. This year at our board, we reinstituted the MOST program, which is working with people with mental illness. So we don't use the jail as their housing facility or as a social service facility, but to provide supportive housing and supportive services to keep them out of the jail. We've worked to create a system when we had the redevelopment agency to pay for supportive housing for transitional populations, moving out of foster care or families in transition. So we've taken some steps forward, but it's a big problem, and you and I disagree about what might be one of the policy solutions. But where we can agree, I think we need to work on that and build on it, because I think once we take away the stigma of homelessness from a lot of people and build on the compassion that I think most people here in Santa Cruz have, we'll be a lot better off.
But your solution only covers 5 to 7%. What are the others supposed to do to sleep at night?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. Nobody does anything about it.
Well, but that's why I disagree with you. We're doing something. We're committing a significant amount of resources, building new housing, providing a new program, not using the jail, and helping support this 180 campaign. That is something. We could argue whether that's enough. But in an era where county government is shrinking, our planning department is 30% smaller than it was 4 years ago.
Good.
We let, not this year's budget, but last year's budget, we let more real live people go from county government than ever in the history of the county, right? We've merged departments together because we can no longer afford to keep it. So this is not an era of expansion in social services. We're trying to hold on to what we've got. and grow in some areas where we can. We instituted a low-income health program to get a head start on this Affordable Care Act, and we're going to over 1,000 low-income people are going to have health coverage that didn't have it before. So we're working on a number of different levels to try to help people out.
Terry?
John, I want to compliment.
This is the closing question.
I understand. Mr. Leopold, I want to compliment your public service and your clearly astute efforts to bring both wisdom and I think compassion as well as wise governance in the way you do your job.
Thank you.
I've observed that. I don't envy the task you have, and many times people are bringing you dilemmas for which
That's
there
my job.
obviously is no answer or solution. But frankly, speaking of the big strategic picture, we have a planet that's overpopulated, and we have a planet diminishing its water, and we have focused here in Santa Cruz a university. I was here umpteen years ago, decades, when the university
Gonna wrap it
they
up,
were going to be a
Terry.
good citizen, and they're not. If they want to add campus extension and require more water, let them find that water themselves from their own sources. In addition, on the big picture, there's going to be 45% less water 12 years from now coming to the central coast of California, in the opinion of Dr. Lisa Sloan up at UCSC. Why don't we bite the bullet and say, fine, we will have no more growth in Santa Cruz County because we don't have water, we have limited space, etc.
Amen.
Well, it's Terry, I appreciate that. I saw you at the SoCal Pioneers Picnic this weekend, and appreciate your kind words. It seems easy to just say, we'll close the door and just say, no more, go someplace else. But people come here all the time, and people have expectations about what they're able to do with their property. And if we were to say, by the way, we can't allow any more development, we would be sued. Clearly.
How about standing up to the university, though?
Well, I mean, listen, there's nobody in the room who's standing up more to the university than I am. I'm not going to be winning any alumni awards up there. What I'm trying to do is just to get them to be realistic. I'm willing to say you can grow, but prove that you have the water and make sure that it's adequate, reliable, and sustainable. And let me tell you, the heat that I've gotten from people at the university is extraordinary. And the heat that I've gotten from Santa Cruz City Council members is a lot. Some of my colleagues on the board have given me a really hard time. It's not easy. So I believe, I used to work for the university 7.5 years before I became county supervisor. I love the university. We should cherish that as a resource. But they have to be a good neighbor, and they have to assume responsibility. And at the last LAFCO hearing, the chancellor got up and he made his plea, and then he actually had the audacity to say, and by the way, before you make a decision, we want the opportunity to pool our application before you vote. And that was his way of saying, in the end, we really don't believe we have to come to LAFCO, and we could just do it anyway. But we're just doing this because we said we would. To me, that's the ground we're working on. I'm trying to hold them accountable, and I believe it's in my district that's a very popular position. I've got most people are very supportive in my district, but here in the city, less so. So I just keep on plugging because I think it's the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Next week, Mr. Tom Noddy will be here doing his whole entire bubble routine, plus a long time discussion of his battle with the downtown policy on street performing and all of the legal work that he's been doing on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I hope I covered the things you wanted.